Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Yeah, it's really good to have your company today. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Got a great show lined up for you, and I think this is going to be useful for anybody that's in business, regardless of what kind of business you're in. If you ever have to stand on stage and do presentations and you've used either PowerPoint, Keynote or one of the other many proliferations of presentation software that is out there, then if you've ever had to use any of those, you've probably in the past got it wrong. There's a lot of people out there, they kind of formulate their presentations. They nearly use PowerPoint or Keynote to design what they're going to say, and then they present it in a linear fashion, putting too much information on the slides, not using it as a visual aid, but nearly using it as a script. So the question I'm asking today is, do your slides suck? Are they useless? Do you leave your audience sitting in abject boredom throughout the course of the entire presentation? Do you lose their interest so they're not listening to you anymore? Have you ever said the phrase, you may not be able to read this because there's so much content on your slide? We're joined today by an absolute expert who's going to get down to the nitty-gritty. He's going to ask the question. His name is Dave Henson. He is the slide presentation man. So what we're going to be talking about today is making certain that your slides don't suck, that you've got the best possible size, the best possible presentation to make certain that your presentation is effective and memorable. Dave, it's lovely to have you with us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Don't mind me calling you Dave, do you?
No, that's fine.
Dave the Rave. David. It is something that we see, and now both of us have seen this sort of when we've seen the presentations and things like that, that people sometimes do use slides inappropriately or badly. Before we find out what the thing is that everybody needs to know, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm now known as a slide presentation man, and people, when they ask me how long have you been doing it, I say, well, I've either been doing it for about 5 or 6 years or 32 years, depending on how you look at it. Because I started a company called the Regent Slide Company in 1986, and we produced 35mm slides back in the day. Anyone
Do you know, I remember the panics. You would create your slides, and we were talking about this, Harvard Graphics. You'd then get them to the agency, and the agency would turn those slides into 35mm slides.
Yes, that's what we did.
Gosh, those were the days.
That's what we did, yes. Well, first of all, what we did is they would fax us their brief and we would produce the slides. Then when things like Harvard Graphics came online, they would then produce the slides and give us a disc, and we would image the slides. It was a good little business. But of course, when the projectors got cheaper, that kind of business went downhill a little bit. So we diversified into other areas. And one of the areas I diversified into was web design. And I kind of left the presentations behind for a 17-year sabbatical doing web design. But I was still doing presentation work in the background for some customers. And then it was when I joined Toastmasters in 2011, and then the Professional Speaking Association a few years later, that it dawned on me that even good speakers use bad slides. And people started asking me for advice because they knew I'd been in that kind of business, and I started producing presentations and giving talks. And now it's become my full-time business. So for the last 2.5 years, I've been full-time as a slide presentation man.
When you go into an organisation or somebody turns up and they've got their deck of slides sitting there, there were so many things that you brought up there. I was just thinking, actually, before we ask you the question, in the old days of the 35mm slides, people actually had to have their slides ready prior to the event. There was no last-minute changes. But today, I was in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago, and slides were being changed as people were walking on the stage.
Oh God, yeah.
And to be honest with you, nobody rehearses anymore. All of that seems to have now gone. They deliver their slides, they walk on the stage, and the slides they're jumbled in their head. They don't know what they're really doing with them sometimes. Do you think we've lost some of the etiquette of how to give a good presentation when using slides as visual aids?
Yeah, I think we have. I think what happens is that people just fill their slides with their talk, as we all know, we've all sat in the audience before when you're just reading text off of a screen. I mean, yeah, you're right. In the old days, you just had to. In the old days, it makes me sound like
The
a
old
ancient.
days.
In the old days, we had to, we produced the slides. We had to get them processed, put into slide mounts, and then you couldn't really make last-minute changes. I mean, I remember doing a job for Reuters back in the day where we had to go to Amsterdam and have the film recorder there. But even so, we were working last minute. But even then, you'd still have to allow 2 to 3 hours for a final last minute change. 2 to 3 hours was a last minute change, whereas now, of course, you can just make changes literally a minute before you go on stage. So
the other thing as well about putting content on there and nearly putting their script on the slides. I was at a presentation at it was actually at a girls' school, and we were all sitting there, and the teacher put on the slide, he had a story written. And what amazed me, as he was talking and doing his presentation, this slide came up. And everybody in the room, he continued with his presentation, and then as one, we all started laughing. Because we'd read the slide at about the same pace, and we got to the funny line. And it just really dawned on me, it really emphasised the fact that we've got to remember that if somebody is using a slide and it's got text on it, people will be reading it and not listening to you.
And there's a kind of almost a cognitive exhaustion between trying to listen to the speaker on the one hand and read the slide on the other. And it just gives you a headache just doing that. And in fact, it was funny. I was watching a guy teaching comedy. And he put his jokes on the slide so that the punchline, he was talking about these jokes, and the punchline was on the slide. It was exactly the same sort of thing. So you'd be reading the punchline and laughing at it before he'd actually got to the punchline, which was completely pointless. So it's important that the slides are congruent with the speaker so that they work with the speaker and not... If they're doing the job, you might as well just say, here are my slides, I'm going to go and sit down and have a cup of tea, you just read them. That's what most people do these days. They don't even need to be on the stage.
Just send them to you. Don't even have to come to the presentation. Sounds like a great idea, doesn't it?
Precisely.
Okay, so within business, you're going into business audience, so you're going to the corporate client. What is the thing that you maybe whisper under your breath, or you say to yourself on a repeated basis? What's the singular biggest mistake, do you think, that people do when it comes to using PowerPoint, Keynote, and any other slide programs when it comes to creating their slides?
I think what they do is someone says to them, right, Fred, you've got to give a presentation, and they think, great, no problem, get the laptop open, and they just start typing away in PowerPoint or Keynote, just spewing out words onto the slides, without really giving any thought as to what they're going to say. So obviously the biggest mistake, as we've said, is putting too much text or putting text on the slide in the first place. Now, there's one important point. Some people say to me, and I hear this a lot, they say, but Dave, I need my slides as a prompt, which is obviously not the way you should be looking at slides. But I say, do you know what, if you want to use your slides as a prompt, there's absolutely no problem with that. Just do one really simple and important thing, unplug the projector. So in other words, you can use your slides as your notes like you would do with cue cards, no problem with doing that. Put it in front of you, use it as a prompt, but don't inflict those slides on your audience. So so the biggest mistake I see, a big mistake we all see, is people just filling their slides with their talk, and not working out what the presentation's all about. You need to find out what the subject of the presentation is, who your audience is. Is it 3 or 4 people around a boardroom table? Is it 1,000 people in a large room? Most importantly, what your message is, or messages are, if there's more than one. You need to find out also where you're speaking, and what kind of facilities they've got. If they've got good AV facilities, for example, and of course you need to know how long you're speaking for, whether it's 5, 10, 30 minutes or whatever. Then that helps you decide then how you're going to present, what you're going to do, whether you're going to need to even use slides in the first place, because that happens a lot. People think, because I'm the slide presentation man, I'm always going to say to people use slides, and I'm not, because sometimes I say, look, you don't need slides. You're a good speaker. You can get up on stage. You can tell a story. You don't even need to use slides. I'm doing some slides at the moment for someone, and she talks about telling stories, and we produced a great bunch of slides. But there are parts where I've said to her, just go blank, just the screen, not you, the screen go blank, because you're telling a story at that point. You don't need any visual aids on the screen, because people can imagine it in their own minds what you're talking about.
Well, it's interesting because there's a few things there that you've said that we're going to be talking about. I think the whole thing about using blanks within your slide, should you ever turn off? I remember you were talking the old days, going back in the day when we used to have overhead projectors.
Oh, yes.
And of course, in presentation techniques and presentation skills at the time, what the instructors would tell you to do, they would say, switch the projector off. So put it on, switch the projector on. And what you would actually see, and you still see this today, the eyes in the room would go from you to the screen. And when you switch the projector off, the eyes would come back to you. And I remember doing one presentation, and a guy came up to me at the end of it, and in all honesty, he said to me, he was being very sincere, he said, you shouldn't keep switching it on and off, you will blow the bulb. And I'm thinking, but you just missed the whole point of why I was doing it, you know. So obviously it was an action that was becoming sort of somewhat difficult. There's a big debate at the moment about what should be on the slide. Is it pictures? Is it words? We watch the news every night, and they accomplish in 7 minutes or 4 minutes to get a lot of information, a lot of very complicated information over. Using very simple presentation techniques. Should we be watching the news every night and going, that's the way it should be done?
That's a really good analogy, because if you watch the news, there are times when the newscaster is on the screen by him or herself, just talking to you, the audience, no visuals in the background. And there are times when it's supported with either graphics or, of course, moving footage. So we need to look at the same thing. I've got an acronym which is RICE, R-I-C-E, which stands for Reinforce, Illustrate, Clarify, Explain. If you've got a point that you're making in your presentation that needs to be reinforced, illustrated, clarified or explained by the use of a visual aid, then that's a good candidate for firing up your laptop and producing the slide. But if there's a point in your presentation where you just need to be on stage yourself talking, then just do that. I mean, if you don't need a slide in the background, don't use it. Because that's one of the things I think mistake people make, is they say, I don't use slides at all, or I always use slides, as opposed to thinking, actually, well, if you're giving a presentation and it's part of it that doesn't need to be illustrated or clarified or whatever with the use of a slide, then don't use a slide. And what you said just now was also very important, is that one thing I often say is that your slides are as important as you. We both saw a presentation a few days ago where the guy on stage was a very professional speaker, but his slides were really bad. And the main feedback that he got was that his slides were really bad. And the slides are as important as the speaker, because the attention goes from the speaker to the slides, from the slides to the speaker. If you turn the slides off, the attention goes back onto the speaker. And your slides need to be as professional as you are as a speaker.
Listen, we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more. By the way, Dave is the author of this. I keep calling him Dave. It's just his name's David, for God's sake. What's the matter with me? David has written a book. His book, what he wrote, Your Slides Suck. It's available. You can actually buy it on Amazon, but if you really want... The thing, we were talking about this beforehand as well, if you buy it on Amazon, it feels lovely, but if you buy it from David directly, it feels lovely. It's got a lovely tactile feel about it. It's one of those really weighty books. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, it's just one of those kind of for dummy books, and the content that's going to be inside of it, it's going to be loads and loads and loads of text and all the rest of it here. This is... So it's pretty, it's in colour, it's got big pictures inside of it, and we like stuff like that. The book's called Your Slides Suck, and we've got an introduction as well that you can get that gives you some of the key points that this brings up a little bit later on in the program. We'll tell you how you can download that. That's still to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. Well, it's lovely to have your company as always. We're running, we're a day late today, aren't we? Normally it's Mondays at lunchtime. Today it's Tuesdays at lunchtime, and David was very willing to help us out, so it was really good. A really great guest. Been wanting to get David on the programme for a long time. More about slides in just a few moments' time. Let's go back a week, shall we, right now, to Paul Glynn. He's a Salda Training Southern Counties expert. He gave us a whistle-stop tour through the 6 stages. That was planning, position, people, processes, performetrics, passion, and some of the 24 steps towards organisation. Excellent. That's a big rap that's in here at the moment, banging on the wall. That's what we were talking about on last week's edition of Business Connections Live. A great show. Paul is just a mine of fantastic sales processes, organisational processing information. A terrific show. Really enjoy having him on the program. If you missed it, here are just a few of the highlights from last week's edition of Business Connections Live. My guest in the studio today is Paul Glynn, Sandler Trading, Southern Counties, and we're talking about the 6 P's today on how you can develop and grow your business through organizational excellence.
When we start up in business, we expect to really spending our time doing the thing that we're good at, whether that be IT support or whether it be making a widget or whatever that we're actually good at. That's what we thought we were getting into business to do. In actual fact, it's not. There's so many other things around that. There's how are we going to sell that widget, and how are we going to be most effective in getting all the processes around the business part of things. Those 6 steps, those 6 stages, actually, would you believe, break down to 24 separate steps. In fact, just planning has 10 of those. I suppose that's not a huge surprise, because really and truly it's the planning stage which is perhaps the key. But that planning goes right back to what's the vision that we've got for the organisation? Have we revisited that vision in any sort of sensible format in any length of time? And then we're going to have to look at things like the obvious things like SWOT analysis and pest analysis. First thing, the most obvious thing is to have your vision, your mission and vision clear. Obviously, when we start the business, that's something that hopefully we have done, but then we've got to go back and revisit that. And so therefore, we need to be looking at the external economy that we're working in, as I say, the political, economic, social and technological environment we're in, and then we need to look at our SWOT analysis, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. That analysis has got to be done. We've then got to do a competitor analysis. So in other words, we need to know where it is that we're actually supposed to be driving the organisation to. When it comes to positions, we're looking at the structure, the positions and skill set required to achieve that organisational excellence. Now, I'm not going to look at necessarily the people doing it for the moment, that comes in a moment, but it's a question of what is actually required. So number 11 is we're going to determine the structure needed to implement the plan. That's not necessarily just individual people, because people can have different positions. They're going to have more than one role. But what are those roles that they need? Because we're going to identify the skill sets and attributes needed for each of those positions. Having identified what the skill set is that we need from our people, we've got to work out, well, have we got the right people in place? And if we haven't, we've got to then recruit them. An obvious point, but so often, when we do that organogram and we haven't got that person in place, now it could be that we've got to take somebody internal and give them something new to do, or if we haven't got that person, we then need to recruit them from the outside. My name is Paul Glynn from Sandler Trading, Southern Counties. If you want your organisation to be excellent rather than just average or well run, you need to look at the 6 P's. Let's just say planning, positions, people, performetrics and passion, and work on a plan to get there. We at Sandler have identified 24 different steps, and if you'd like to follow those and reach organisational excellence, perhaps you need to contact one of us.
Paul Glynn there, a fantastic programme. Thank you very much indeed. A really good show. If you want to get more details about that, don't forget you can go to the website and you can check out all the programs. By the way, if you're enjoying today's program, you're thinking, what a great way of communicating difficult business ideas to other people. What a great way of maybe connecting and engaging my audience. If you'd like more details on how you too could have a program just like this one, it is dead easy to do. All you got to do is drop us an email to this address. It is studio@businessconnectionslive.com. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Ideally though, you can pick the phone up now. A lot of us don't do that these days, but we're all going to try even harder. 01784 256 777 is our telephone number. You can have a word either with myself or with Linda Bazan or any of the other people that are in and the team here. So go on, give us a call. If you want to have a chat about that, then we're really open just to talk through maybe some of the ideas that you have. Don't forget, you can follow our stream of consciousness. You can also watch the programme as well on Twitter too, if you go along. It's BCL Business TV. You can see the programme on Facebook Live. You can leave comments, requests and dedications there too. But don't forget, over 300 hours of great business advice waiting for you if you go to our main website, which is businessconnectionslive.com. That's businessconnectionslive.com. Always good to have your company, and nice to know that you're with us today and you're enjoying the programme. Your slides suck. That's the question that we're talking about. David Henderson is the guy that is joining me. He is the slide man, the slide presentation man, and he's been doing this nearly all of his life. And it's just fantastic to have him with us today to actually give some of the great information that he's got lined up for us today. Let's talk a little bit about images, shall we?
Yeah, I think so. I think images is there's 3 points about images. The first thing is that that if you're using images, then it automatically cuts down the amount of room you've got on the slide for text, which is a win, because I'm always saying to people, aim towards 0 bullet points.
Really, point 1, aim towards 0 bullet points. I like that.
Yeah, that's a one top tip. Aim towards 0 bullet points. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use text at all, but it means if you can, with these bullets that come up, little round bullets and text coming across, try to avoid that. The second thing is that when you're using images, if you're putting together a presentation, it's much more fun. Much more fun if someone says you can put together a presentation, you're just typing out loads of words and source some decent images.
But it's nice because you've got this thing here on one of the presentations that you've got, and I really like this. It's a nice colourful picture. There it is, and so a little bit of animation does really work. You don't get carried away on this, and I quite like the way that it actually fades down to black. You bring the words in, so using images.
Yep.
I mean, it's just a nice way of introducing a particular topic. So here we are. We're talking about slides on images. Tell us a little bit more then about what we should be thinking about.
Okay. Well, I think that there's things that you should be thinking about avoiding. First of all, actually, these are the 3 points I was going to make. So I think it's more fun. The most important point, of course, is that it makes your slides more memorable and therefore more effective when you're using it.
Because we think in pictures, don't we? We don't think in lists or words. Yeah. We think in pictures.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. But there are things that you should avoid with images as well. And the first thing you need to avoid is the cliched images. Because they're the kind of visual equivalent of bullet points. So yeah, things like that where you've got the
handshake, it's going to be another bullseye for our sales target.
That's it.
Sales are growing. Well done, everybody.
And that ubiquitous 3D stick man, I hate them with a passion.
Yeah, the morph-like characters, yes. But you're dead right, aren't you? And you see that a lot. Is that just lazy design, do you think?
I think to be fair, people aren't trained graphic designers. They don't think necessarily out of the box. They don't think about the images that you're using, and if they think, I've got to put up an image that says our sales are on target, I'll use a dart going into a bullseye. That's but it's so cliche that it becomes, as I just said, it's the visual equivalent of using bullet points. So if you can avoid cliches on the handshake, the handshake is just, it's just ubiquitous and it's used everywhere for anything. And actually, I'll tell you what I've noticed more and more now, and I have used a few of these, but I've just realised probably in the last few weeks, as I've been looking around at stock images and that on the web, is this kind of image of, it's normally a sunset or a mountain and someone jumping in the air. There's millions of those about now, and it's kind of that's become a cliche now. So I'm going to make sure I avoid those. You can quite easily get into the habit of using cliches without even realising that they are cliches.
It's interesting because we put together our graphics every week for the individual programmes, and colour is very important for us. So we're kind of looking for a hook to hang the graphic that's in the background. In fact, can we have today's programme graphic, Gordon? I know that's completely out of the blue. He wasn't explaining. There, this one here. So what I was looking for there, the very background graphic is a picture of someone presenting very out of focus.
Yeah.
Because I want the words to actually jump out of the screen.
Yeah.
And then we've got our logo, which is sitting in the next layer up from that, which is also similarly out of focus. It's just to add a bit of colour to it. Predominantly, we're looking for the blues, the greys, and the pinks. Then we've got some nice big text on there, so it says exactly what we're talking about, and then a nice clear photograph of you. All of our programme slides are very similar to that because I'm looking for that colour. And in fact, if you look at the colour palette, shall we say, of our website, there's a lot of blue there, the blues and the pinks and the greys.
Yes, I think so. There's two things there. I mean, the image that you showed of me on the background, with the background out of focus, is great. It's what photographers call selective focus.
And it draws the eye to you.
Yeah, and they do it by opening up the aperture on the camera so the background goes out of focus and everything is in the foreground is sharp. The second thing is the colour palette. Well, it's about keeping the slides consistent. So even though you might be using, you've decided you're not going to use all this text, you're going to make the slides look really good. If you're using a whole mishmash of colours and fonts, for example, in the slide presentation, it can be just as bad. So you need to select your colour palette either based on.
How many colours in that do you?
I would say that you need 5 plus black and white. That's what I would normally go for. Normally out of those 5, you've got 2 or 3 main colours and then 2 or 3 secondary colours that you use. So, and some companies, of course, have got their own colour palette. They've got their own corporate brand guidelines with colour palette in it. Other companies, if I'm working with smaller companies, they might not have their branding colours, but more often than not, you can go on and sample the colours from their website. The presentation I'm working on at the moment, I've just done that, and I've gone in and created a colour palette within PowerPoint that I can then use throughout the presentation.
Do you think for a lot of people that is actually quite subliminal? They don't realise that there is a colour palette that they should be working to, or do you think they use just colours all over the place because they think it gives visual impact?
I think it's one of those things that if you use a colour palette, the audience might not notice, but if you don't and you use a whole mishmash of colours, the audience might notice. The audience is more likely to notice when something's wrong than when something's right. If you see what I mean. So if you're using 4 or 5 fonts, for example, on one slide, you're going to think, that's a bit of a mishmash, it looks horrible. Whereas if you're using just 1 or maybe 2, one for the heading and one for the text, for example, and that's consistent throughout the presentation.
Are there cliché fonts, by the way?
Oh, right, don't get me started on Comic Sans.
Comic Sans, I mean, you see people use that in their emails, and I don't know whether it's because I've spoken to people like you, but if I see an email come in that they're using the font Comic Sans, I don't take the email seriously anymore. And what you tend to get is then they'll also colour it in, because they've actually started, the fact that they've gone down the route of using Comic Sans as a font, then they'll make it brown or something. And I think,
if you go to slide 96 on that.
96, right. Keep looking at David while he's talking, I'll find slide 96.
This is an example of Comic Sans being misused.
Only another 30 slides to go, David. 96 was a long way up there.
Sorry, there's quite a lot of slides in that slide bank.
We're nearly there.
And it's under the section on font usage.
There we go. So font usage is where we are at the moment.
Okay, and the next slide down. This is a pub not too many miles away from where I live, called the Royal, and it uses Comic Sans in its pub sign. So basically that's a great big flag to me. Never go into that pub. It's probably full of kids.
But you're right. Sometimes using 2 fonts actually does work, doesn't it? Because the next slide that you've got there, and here we are. I mean, that's Comic Sans again. Down
no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's a handwritten font.
It's a handwritten font.
Yeah, it's not Comic Sans.
That really works there, doesn't it? And it shows how the colours can actually make so first of all, the headline, an orange a day. See, what more do you need from a slide? Your slide shouldn't be the entire story. Your slide should be the thing that is pointing your people in the direction that you want them to be thinking. And that's what that does. An orange a day keeps a doctor away.
Yeah, because I mean, I was using that slide. That slide is actually used in my book to talk about fonts. But, if that was a slide that was being used on the screen, then you could presume that the speaker was probably speaking about the benefit of eating fruit, for example, and they may be speaking for 5 minutes while that slide's on the screen, or 2 minutes while that slide's on the screen. It doesn't get in the way of what they're saying. It just backs up what they're saying. And by the way, Steve, please never accuse me of using Comic Sans typeface. If ever I use Comic Sans typeface, you can shoot me. Mind you, I did use it once when I was doing in my web design days. I used it for a company.
I just have to get the gun out now, won't I?
A bouncy castle company, just for their headlines. But other than that, I've never used Comic Sans typeface.
It is very strange. What is the new corporate big thumbs up font at the moment?
I tell you what, if you are looking for fonts to use, look on Google Fonts. They're all accessible. They're all free to download. They're great. There's a lot of fonts now that have become old-fashioned in that they've been around for a long while. Another font that I would try, another font that is really nice, but I would avoid is Calibri, because Calibri is the Office default. So you go into PowerPoint, a Word or whatever you go into. And
we use Calibri right across all our documents.
Calibri is nice. It's been made to be. It was designed by Microsoft to be a nice readable font. But it's become a cliched font because it is the default. So I've got nothing against Calibri, other than the fact that it's so wide, again, ubiquitous. I'm using that word again. So.
We're not sounding very nerdy here, are we? I hope we're not.
Oh, I don't know. I think I am.
I mean, we're talking about fonts. It does sound ever so slightly nerdy, doesn't it?
Well, I was talking to someone not so long ago and talking about fonts, and she said, "Well, I'm font blind. I don't really notice that the fonts are being used, but I think the font does. It's important. It does lend a certain tone to the presentation. You know, because for example, if you were using Comic Sans or Arial, for example, then people are going to take the Arial slide more seriously.
There does seem to be a view at the moment where a lot of people are going back to the Arial, Arial bold. Just give it a bit more space. For instance, I think Lloyds Bank, for instance, are one of those organisations. They did a rebrand. It probably cost them thousands, millions. And what they did, they took, they took Arial. Why am I talking? I'm talking to Gordon, because Gordon's agreeing with what I'm saying, you see. How unprofessional. Anyway, we were talking about the fact that it is effectively Arial bold. Yeah. And what they've done is that they've made the spaces between the letters bigger. Yeah. And they probably charged them millions for that.
Probably, yeah. And the other important consideration, actually a technical consideration, is that of course sometimes if you put other fonts in your presentation, then you give someone else the presentation, the fonts won't work. Yeah. It's important in PowerPoint to embed the fonts in the presentation, which it's a little bit different.
Not that worked today when we were transferring it from a Windows machine to a Mac.
They nearly all worked, didn't they?
They nearly worked.
Yeah, I think it was 95% of them worked, but the one or two didn't quite work. But yeah, I think you must embed the fonts in the presentation, which you can do when you save it, which is a technical consideration. And that's why some people say that's why I use Calibri and Arial, because they're going to be everywhere. They're going to be everywhere, so you haven't got to worry about that, which you can understand.
All right, listen, we've got more to talk about. In fact, we haven't touched on any of the topics that we promised that we were going to talk about when we came in here today, but we are going to be talking about some of them in just a moment. We've kind of touched on when you should and shouldn't use slides. We've kind of touched on that, maybe a little bit more on that. How to use images properly in slides. What about placement, things like that? We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. There are some people who just get carried away completely with animation. So we're not even talking about the content this time, we're just talking about the way that the different words are brought on there. You have people that fly things on, twist things on and all the rest of it. And image usage techniques that will elevate your slide deck. We're going to be talking about that as well in just a few moments' time on this edition of Business Connections Live. I get the funny feeling actually that this particular program could last for 2 hours, because it's just one of those topics that is just of interest to everybody that's in business. If you're doing a pitch at the moment to raise funds for your organisation, you're going to be going in there and you're going to be standing. How do you go about it? Does everything go on the slides? Somebody was pitching to me the other day, and while the pitch was really, really interesting, at the end of it, it took nearly 40 minutes for me to figure out what the pitch was about. So a badly thought out pitch, slides that didn't really convey the story. Yet the story that was being told was a story, actually, when I found it out, was fantastic. And it shows that you could go in and you could be pitching your idea, you could be pitching your business. And because even though you've got a great idea, you may well have it funded. Because even though you've got a great idea, because of the way you pitch it and the techniques that you use in your slide design, your slide presentation, your visual aids, you could lose the pitch. So that's how important what we're talking about is. This is brand management, reputation management at the highest order, because this will be the impression that your customer, your client, your prospect will actually have of your organization or your business. My guest on today's show is David Henson. He is the slide presentation man. More from him in just a moment. Another great speaker that we had on the program a little while back. If we go back to March, in fact, of last year, I was talking to Nigel Risner. Are you familiar with Nigel Risner?
Yes, yeah. Well, I've never met him, but I'm familiar with him by reputation.
Just an absolute pussycat when he was here in the studio, but I think he frightens a few people out on the street. He's an international business speaker, and he talks about, he's got a book out called The Impact Code, which is a fantastic book to read. He's also got a book out called The Communication Zoo, and how a good zookeeper can make all the difference. In fact, on his business card, it says Nigel Risner, Chief Zookeeper. And what he does, he looks at people in business and he divides them into different areas. So are you an elephant within your business? Are you a monkey? Are you mischievous? He does that kind of thing. Great show. He is a terrific speaker. I cannot recommend him highly enough. If you ever get a chance to see him live, some people say he's a bit Marmite. I just think he's brilliant. The program was called How to Create Impact with Your Communications. It was Business Connections Live 176. And here were the key takeaways that he mentioned on that edition of the program.
My name is Nigel Risner. My business is Nigel Risner & Associates. And we ask clients to turn themselves from limited to limitless. We want people to be in the room, to really model off the very best organisations that are out there, in everything they do to be passionate, take loads of action, communicate like a zookeeper, and most of all, trust themselves and trust the process. It's been an honour to be here, and thank you very much indeed.
What a nice guy. And at the beginning of not this year, but the previous year, he wasn't very well, and because he'd worked himself in the ground. But he is one of those presenters, one of those speakers that will do 3 countries in a day and think nothing of it. And I'm not talking about he's going to go to Scotland, England and Wales. He will do Italy, he'll do Lithuania, and he might do Spain, and he'll do 3 talks in a day. And the reason he's able to do that is just because of his enthusiasm and just his he is wanted by everybody because of what he says. If you get a chance, if you can download it, if you can get a copy of the book, the Impact Code is fantastic, and if you can get the one on zookeeping, the Communication Zoo, then do get a copy of that as well. You're watching Business Connections Live. It's great to have your company as always. Steve Harlan with you here. We're live each and every week over 300, over 400 hours now, nearly, of great business advice and programs that are available for you to download. My guest on today's show is a guy I've been wanting to get on the program for a long time, David Henson. He is the slide presentation man. He's a man that's been involved in business for, numerous years. It's hard to tell it when you look at him, but he's had the skin all tightened up a little bit. But, he's been working with presentation aids for a number of years, going right back to the Harvard graphic days. When you say that, people will just look blankly
Most
at
people
you.
will.
What is Harvard Graphics? Harvard Graphics was the one that you would make the 35mm slides on, and you would, it had all the graphs and everything, and it was a nightmare program to work with, if my memory serves me right.
It was it was one of the first that came out. It was manufactured by a company called SPC, who were in Bracknell.
Yes, it was.
Yes, and there were programs like Lotus Freelance. There was one called Super Graphics. People used Corel Draw.
Corel Draw.
And then PowerPoint. And there was one we used to use was Adobe Persuasion, which was a really good program. And then PowerPoint came along
and just
was
wiped the board with everybody.
With Windows, and just So,
and there is, and I think because of that, because everybody is. They just see it as it's the go-to presentation.
Yeah, and it's got that kind of reputation now. Oh, PowerPoint, but it's not. PowerPoint is just.
Well, it's
a tool.
death by PowerPoint. Is what you hear, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but PowerPoint is just a tool. You can use any tool badly. You can use an electric drill and drill through a pipe. It's not the drill's fault. It's your fault for not using it properly. And it's the same with PowerPoint. You can't blame PowerPoint for the fact that you put text on the slide. Well, you can blame it to a certain extent because. Kind of with the slide masters in PowerPoint, Microsoft sort of almost encourages you to do that. But really, once you've learnt the techniques of putting together a good slide presentation, then you can't blame PowerPoint if it goes wrong. It's your own. It's your own fault.
It's your own fault, and you should. So, what are we going to talk about now? We're going to move on. We're going to look at. We're going to use graphics and animation.
Yeah, animations. This is again the kind of thing that people often misuse or overuse.
Well, I was talking about transitions and the way people use transitions in their PowerPoints.
Yeah.
Is there a rule of thumb when it comes to transitions? For instance, is the crossfade enough? In video editing, for instance, you tend to use crossfades and cuts.
Yep. Well,
but a video editing package will give you crossfades,
Yeah.
cuts, flips, rotates, blah, 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 blah. And you see these videos, and the videos, they've just got a new box of toys,
Yeah.
and they use all of it.
That's it, precisely. Same with PowerPoint. You've got all these animations and transitions, so let's use the whole lot. So transitions are the way that one slide moves on to another, and animations, just to make it clear, are the movements within the slide. So exactly right. What I use fade. The only other transition I tend to use is morph. Morph is new in PowerPoint 2016, and it's great. I use it all the time because you can move objects. You can put an object on slide 1 and then move it on slide 2, and it will morph from one to the other.
Now, Keynote, we are now sounding nerdy. Keynote's had that. I can't remember what it's called actually in Keynote.
Yeah, it is. Again, I'm not an expert on Keynote, but
Keynote does exactly the same thing. So you may have a large graphic in the middle of the screen, and your next slide, you may just want the graphic to be a lower third, and it will shrink it and move it.
Yeah, it's great. It works. I mean, again, it can be misused and overused, but I use it quite a lot of the time. If it enhances the slide and helps get the message across. So it's quite a useful little thing.
Do we need to look at some pictures?
Oh, that's a good question. Now, have I got?
So you've got one here.
Yeah, that one there. Yeah,
let's have a quick look at this. So this is Wimbledon. Where are you? Wimbledon prize money, 1985. Now, when I hit the button, we'll see the animation, will we? So this is. So stuff like that actually does emphasise the point. 1985, and you can see. Now that really does work very well, doesn't it? It emphasises what you're trying to do. You've got a timer in there, so this is quite a complicated slide as such.
Yeah, I mean, but it was all done in PowerPoint, so that's the important point to get across. The animations are quite complex. I mean, on the slide itself, if I'm looking on my laptop now at the animation pane, for example, there's probably about 30 or 40 animations on this slide, so it's not a quick and easy thing to do, but yeah, it was all done in PowerPoint. The thing I was saying earlier on about images, it's quite important to be a good slide producer. You have to be a good image editor as well, I think. And obviously the tennis balls on that slide were cut out. The tennis player was cut out so that he's not on a white box. But you can do that in PowerPoint. You can cut around images.
You can actually cut around them.
Most people don't know that, but you can actually do that. So
what would be the tool that is also sitting on your machine next to you? You've got PowerPoint there. Do you have Photoshop over here?
You know what? I use a program called Adobe Fireworks, which isn't actually part of the Adobe suite anymore. But I've been using it for years and years and years, and it's brilliant for producing highly optimized graphics, which can be cutouts, it can be JPEGs, it can be animated GIFs, it can be all sorts of things. I do use Photoshop as well, but as long as Adobe carry on supporting Fireworks, I'm going to carry on using that. But there are online, if you haven't got Photoshop or Fireworks or any of these other image programs on your computer, there are online programs like Pixlr, Pixlr, which allows you to do exactly the same thing. You can open up files from your computer or from the web, and then you can edit them, and cut them out, and save them on your computer. So
is it a case though of sitting down? Because if we just go back to that slide again, it's a very simple slide, isn't it? There's not really, even once the slide is complete.
Yep.
It's the story on that slide is very simple.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, 130,000 to 188. 1,880,000. But the actual thing that you're trying to get over is very straightforward.
Yeah.
There isn't actually a lot. There's no text on it.
No, it's simple. I mean, you've got the title, you've got a subtitle, and then you've got the 4 data points, and that's all you need. The person on the stage will do the talking around that. They might talk about why the prize money went up by a certain amount between X date and Y date, but you don't need the slide to say any more than that.
And there's some other examples that are here as well. So
Yeah.
this is, once again, this is showing, this is the use of colour again now here, isn't it?
Yeah, that one isn't animated, but yeah, it's the use of colour. Again, the way that was done, it was a graphic of the bark with a bit cut out in the middle, and then another graphic of the bark put behind, and then semi-transparent segments put over the top of it.
And I think the thing that strikes me about that is it's relevant to what they're talking about. So they're actually using something that is from the industry that they're in to actually illustrate what they're talking about. Now this one is animated as well. I quite like this one. Help.
Very simple animation, but it just gets the point across that the sea level's rising. Bit of a doom and gloom slide, but it gets the point across.
Do you think people spend a little bit too much time sometimes just thinking about the words and putting the words on the slides and doing stuff like that is going to be visually stimulating and make people remember?
Too much time on the words.
Yeah.
I think yes, I think so. I think they need to think about what needs to be on the screen that will support the message they're trying to get across. I think it's the important thing. Is the message you're trying to get across on stage. First of all, as I said right at the beginning, does it need a slide in the first place? And if it does, what should that slide then contain? It certainly shouldn't contain what you're saying, but it could contain the points that you're bringing up. If you're bringing up 3 points, for example, then you might just have 3 titles come up on the slide with images on each one, for example. So yeah, it needs to, and it may be that, as I said again, that you just need to think about rice. Does the point you're trying to make need to be reinforced by the use of a visual, or illustrated, or clarified, or explained? Do you really need that slide? And then, if so, what should that slide contain that's going to complement what you're saying on stage and not clash with it?
We're using lots of images. Where do you get your images from?
Yeah, now this is an important point.
Because everybody thinks if it's on the internet, then it's free.
Yeah.
And you can use it willy-nilly and everything's fine.
Yeah. You've got to be very careful, of course. If you're a professional speaker, then you need to be professional about the way you source your images. There are plenty of free sources of images. The 2 websites that I use are Pixabay, Pixabay, and Unsplash, which is a strange name, UNSP.
Unsplash, very good.
Unsplash, yeah. So they're free, and you can download images from there. I use Pixabay a lot. I use Pixabay a lot in my book actually as well. If you for a few quid, you can use images on Shutterstock. Now Shutterstock, the last time I looked, had about 210 million images, which is absolutely ridiculous. No, so you can find almost any image on Shutterstock and pay. I mean, the subscription that I use, it costs me about £5.56 per image, and obviously most of the time I'm charging it onto the client anyway, because they're asking me to download these images.
And where do we stand when it comes to finding? So we go into images on Google, and we type in the kind of image we're looking for, and we find an image.
Yeah.
Where do we stand with using those?
Okay, well, if you go into Google, there's a bit at the top where you've got the Tools drop-down menu, and you can select images that have been labelled for reuse. Now, when they're labelled for reuse, doesn't mean they're free to use. It might mean that you have to. There's a thing called Creative Commons, which allows you to reuse content, either completely free, because out of the goodness of their heart, someone's decided to let you use their image, or with an attribution. Often you have to put a little attribution on it. Now, I'm trying to keep slides uncluttered, but sometimes if you find the image that you want, for example, I've used an image of Bob Geldof on a slide this week, which I found on Creative Commons that needed an attribution. They wanted a picture of Bob Geldof, and so I had to put that on the slide just to show. But put it quite small down on the bottom of the slide.
And do you have to follow any particular rules? For instance, in the world of television, there is a point size that you can use if it is particular. For instance, when you see Strictly, which I'm a big fan of, if you see Strictly when they're talking about their T's and C's, their terms and conditions, the size of that text has to be of a particular point size. Are there any rules, regulations, or suggestions from you? Is there a point size on a slide that you should never use?
I don't know about the question. I don't know the answer to that question, whether you have to use a certain point size. I've never seen it requested before, so I don't think you do. I tend to use it at about 10 or 12 point on a slide for the attribution. Keeps it nice and small down in the bottom corner or something. So yeah, that's a good question, Steve, and I don't know the answer to. I've never seen on Creative Commons. I've never seen any requirement for the font size. What they'll do is, if you use it on the web, they'll give you the embed code for the HTML for using on the website. But no, I don't know whether you have to use it at a certain size or not.
We've gone very geeky there just for a second. Do excuse us, won't you? You're watching Business Connections Live. Our guest on today's show is David Henson. He is the slide presentation man. More from David in just a few moments' time. Now, every month, more and more of you are downloading the programme on iTunes, and for that, thank you very much. Incidentally, you can watch the programme all over the place. You can watch it live on either a Monday or a Tuesday, either on YouTube, Facebook, or whenever we feel like doing it, Periscope. You can watch it then if you wish, or of course you can then catch up with it afterwards on going to things like Stitcher, Blueberry, and a whole host of other podcasting platforms as well, where it's going to be available as well for that matter. So that's very good. But one place that we do like you downloading the program is on iTunes. And as I said, thousands of you are downloading the program on iTunes each and every week. So thank you very much for that. What would be a big help if you do download the program and you find it useful? For instance, if you watch today's show and you're thinking, do you know what, that David Henson was a fantastic, insightful kind of a guy. Leave a nice comment, please. It's dead easy to do. All you've got to do is go into your iTunes account and then find the program in iTunes. You'll find a tag that says view in iTunes. Just click on that and then that'll open up all the programs. You'll be able to see all in their description of what the show's all about, but a ratings and reviews tab too. Click on that and that will then take you to the customer rating. You can write a review. It also gives you the option to give it stars. We'd like 5, please. Thank you very much indeed. Just say it's great, and that will really help us out. And what will happen will be that when people are actually watching Business Connections or another business program, there are others, yes, when they're watching other business programs, iTunes will then recommend our program for them to watch as well. Now that increases the audience, that really helps us. So if you can do that, that would be a superb help. So thank you very much indeed. And in anticipation, I'm sure it's going to be 5 stars, and David and Steve were great when they were talking about slide presentation. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company as always. We're into the last segment of this particular program. We're talking about making certain that your slides don't suck. It's easy to do. There is a book available, by the way, Your Slides Suck. It's a question. Do your slides suck? The ones that you're using at the moment, do you go out there? Are you a terror? Do you massacre people with your slides? Is it death by PowerPoint? Then you need to be getting a copy of this book. The book is available if you go to David's website. If you go to our webpage, it's just that this program is on, then you'll find all of David's contact details there, and you can also find out where you can purchase the book as well. Okay, let's go back. So where should we move to now? Because we've looked a lot. We've looked at animations. We've looked at colour palettes.
We could look at image usage techniques.
Image usage techniques. Have I got to go to a slide number?
Go to slide number 80, Steve.
Number 80, I can do that. So what are we going to be seeing when we get to number 80?
This is actually a text slide.
Okay, I'm there.
A minimal text slide, I hasten to add.
So this is a text slide. So we can bring the slide up on screen. I'm just actually going to go back a slide. There we go. So here it is. Let's just click on it. There it is. It's in full colour. And I love the way you do that.
Desaturate
it. It drops, yeah, desaturate it. And I take it it's a building slide. So let's talk about panning.
Okay. Well, actually, this slide is panning, masking.
So this is actually what the content of the slide is all about.
Yes, this is the content of the next section. So, I mean, if we go on to the next slide, this is an illustration of what I was talking about, the morphing technique. So this is 2 slides. It's gone from one where it goes from the bottom of my website, and the second slide goes to the top, so it morphs from one to the other. And if you go on to the next slide, Steve, you'll see again the morphing technique used. So the sky in the background is morphing across, the balloon is morphing from large to small, and then I have to say I was railing against cliches earlier on. That's probably a little bit of a cliche, but
reaching new heights.
So that gives an idea of how morph can be used. It can be used.
That is really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite neat, isn't it?
Just going to have a look at that again because I quite enjoyed that very much indeed. So there we go. We'll bring it back. There we go.
You can sing the song if you like.
So to do that, how many slides are actually there? Are you creating, first of all, this slide effectively?
Yeah, 2 slides. So this slide, and what you do then, so you create the slide. The first slide's just got the balloon and the sky on it. And then you duplicate that slide, and on the second slide you shrink the balloon down, move it up into the top right corner, you move the sky across because it's a long panoramic image, and then you fade the text in. Very simple to do. Again, of course, the balloon is cut out, so as you can see, the balloon's cut out. It's a transparent background behind the balloon.
But this is all about putting a little bit of effort into your slides, isn't it? So this is for those people that are going to be. These aren't something that you can be knocking up for a quick office presentation, are they?
Probably not. No, you need to, as I say, you need to learn two things. You need to learn how to use PowerPoint properly, and you need to learn how to use an image editing program properly, because as I said, images are really important within a presentation, but they're so often badly used that you need to do that as well. And of course, you need to understand all about what makes a good presentation in the first place.
The next slide I'm intrigued about. I just want to see what it does because I obviously haven't seen the entire slide deck. But this is the
this is masking. Yeah, so this is the middle triptych of Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights.
Do I click on this now?
Yes, you click on it now, and what happens is that moves across, and then it highlights a section, a detail, and then I think if you click again, I think that's the idea, what you'll see is that it masks a section of the image. That apparently is a self-portrait of Hieronymus Bosch that he snuck under that table in that particular part of the painting.
He needs to see a doctor, doesn't he, quite frankly?
He's a bit pale, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But that uses a very simple masking technique, which can be done in a couple of ways. And again, within PowerPoint, the easiest way of doing that is that you would you create a rectangle with a circle on top of it. You then punch the circle through the rectangle, which you can do in PowerPoint, and then you make the rectangle semi-transparent and place it over the image. And then you fade it in, so it just picks out. It looks like the rest of it's fading back. What it is, the rest of it is fading back while you're picking out that point that you want to concentrate on. So masking can be a really powerful technique. That if you, what it can also be useful. Let's imagine you're giving a presentation and you're talking about a website and you want to pick out a particular link on a website on the image on the screen. Again, you can fade the rest of the website back and just put like a rectangular highlight over the part that you want to talk about. Again, very simple to do.
From a business point of view, David, when you go in and you give these recommendations and you say you need to be using colour palettes, you need to be using fonts, you need to do the right image in the right place, you need to animate it correctly, you need the right transitions. Do you ever get kickback from people? Do you ever get people going, you don't know what you're talking about? I mean, for instance, if you're going in and you're talking to a CEO of a multinational, do they get all of that?
Most often they do. To be fair, yeah. Most often they're sensible enough to leave the things that they don't know about to the experts, I think. I've occasionally had people say to me, this thing I was talking about with people saying, I'd like to use my slides as a prompt. And I'm saying to them, well, unplug the projector. Oh, no. And you get a bit of kickback there. But, you like with anything, isn't it? You try to persuade people to do things in what you think is the right way, and if they don't want to do it, then that's obviously entirely up to them. But
we see bad slides. What's the worst slide you've ever seen? Or the worst usage of slides?
When I ran my slide company, I once had someone send me a disc to image the slides, which they produced probably in Harvard Graphics or whatever, but it had yellow text on a white background.
Yellow text on a white background? So there must be some palettes that you should never. Well, that's one of them. But there must be some palettes that you should never. What are the worst colour combinations?
Well, I'll tell you what you should do. Actually, I don't know what the website is, but you can. It might be something to do with the RNIB, Royal National Institute for the Blind. They have a thing where you can put in two different colours, and it will tell you give you the kind of contrast ratio between those two colours to tell you whether it is accessible. It's actually mainly built for websites because accessibility is obviously an important thing on the web. So it'll tell you how accessible those two colours are when they're placed next to one another, or when the text is, if you've got one colour text on a different colour box. So that's quite useful. I mean, obviously the most important thing is to use colours that are really contrasty, because sometimes you're presenting in a room where the lights are on, as we've all done that, so which is a shame sometimes, because you've got these really nice slides and suddenly you've got these lights coming on it, so onto the screen. So if you can get the contrast between text or slide elements and the background as high as possible, I don't mean use black and white all the time, but you know what I mean, so that people can read it. That's quite important.
You see, we are deep blues and white.
Yeah.
And that works
That
because
works, yeah.
you'll always see it.
Yeah.
You'll always see it.
Well, in the old days, it was always when we used to make slides before the age of computer graphics. 90% of them were just white on blue, white text on blue background.
Here's a question for you: 4:3 or 16:9? I'm talking about aspect ratio.
Yeah.
What should you do with that? And if you're making, because for a long while PowerPoint defaulted to 4:3, didn't it?
Defaults
but
to
of course
16:9 now.
It defaults to 16:9 now, does it?
Yeah.
And if you're ever wondering about 16:9, where that all comes from, and I'm assured this isn't folklore, but we kind of see 16:9. If you do that, and then take your hands apart, as your hands go into your peripheral vision, that's the width that you see. And if you do the same like that, as they go into your peripheral vision, that is approximately 16:9. It's the way we see. That's why we're so comfortable.
I didn't know that.
So it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but no. But if you're asking me which one I would use, I would always use 16:9 now because it looks more. If you're looking at 4:3, it's like looking at an old TV, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like looking at a program from the 1970s.
The BBC from the 1960s.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, where 16:9 is much more. It looks more modern. It looks like. And I say PowerPoint will now default to 16:9 anyway. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you're using 4:3. And sometimes, of course, people have got their big screens up and they're almost set to 4:3. So, it's not the end. It's not a biggie. But to me, 16:9 looks more modern and up to date. So, yeah.
I can't believe it. We've talked for an hour. We have talked for an hour, actually.
It's flown by.
It's flown by, and it always does this. I'm going to invite you in just a moment to give the key takeaways straight down the camera, if you're okay with that.
Okay.
David Henson has been the guest on today's edition of Business Connections Live. We've been talking about, do your slides suck? I mean, are you getting the most out of your slides? Are they the most effective they can be? If you want to get a copy of the book, go to the page that this program is on our website, Business Connections Live, and you'll find a link to his page, and you'll be able to download. Well, you won't be able to download the book, but it'll take you to that, because that'd be awful, wouldn't it? You don't want to download the book. No. He's not giving it away. Oh no, sirree. He's going to come round your house and take the money from you, penny by penny. How much is the book, by the way?
It's £15.
Yeah, it's £15. Now that is, you're getting a lot of information for the money.
Yep.
Here's something that I love about this book, and yeah, I find there it is. I don't know whether you can see this. Our overhead camera is doing all sorts of funny things, but can you see the QR code that's just here at the moment? This here. So what that does is, from the pages of the book, I've always wondered the best way of doing this, but it means that what you can do, you can read the text that's on the page, then use your phone, and then that's going to take you to a web page where there are additional pieces of material, additional training at the other end of the QR code. Now, I think that is a great idea. I'm going to implement that into some of the stuff that I do, because I think that is a brilliant. The book's a cracking read. Maybe give this one away.
You may indeed.
We'll give this one away, and what we'll do, we'll leave it open until next week. But what should we get? What we'd like you to do is leave a comment either on YouTube, Facebook, or wherever, and the line that you need to put in is my slides don't suck because I've watched David Henson. My slides don't suck because I watched David Henson. And if you put that in the comments, below the program, we will at random take one of the people that have done that, and we'll send you the book out. And very best of luck, and I hope it goes well for you on that. So then, if you'd like to say who you are and where you're from and what you do, and the key takeaways, this is the hard bit.
Yes.
And the key takeaways from what we've kind of learned and talked about today, straight down camera number 4 over there.
Okay.
The airways, David, are all yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, I am David Henson. I am the slide presentation man. I've been working with slides now for 32 years, on and off, from the old 35mm slides in the old days, right up to the modern graphics with PowerPoint and so on. It's really important that your slides reflect your message, that they're congruent with what you're saying on stage, and that they don't clash with what you're saying. In other words, don't put your script on your slides. Make sure that they reflect what you're trying to say. It's also, there's nothing wrong also with going blank, not you personally, but on your slides. So if there's a part of your presentation where you don't need to use slides, turn off. Just go black, and then the audience will concentrate on you again. In terms of what you need to know to produce slides, obviously you need to know how to use things like PowerPoint or Keynote or Prezi or whatever tool you want to use. They're all tools, by the way. I don't go in for all this kind of stuff about which one's better than the other. But also you need to know how to manipulate images, how to edit images, because images are a really important part of presenting. And I think that if you can learn how to edit images and produce good images, that's going to have a really good effect on what you produce. So yes, Dave Henson, slide presentation man, good luck with your slide presentations.
Very best of luck with your slide presentation indeed, David. Thank you very much indeed. Also, Dave has prepared a PDF that you can download. Here's a little picture of what you can download. It gives you some of the top tips that you need when it comes to actually producing your slides. Top tips, here it comes. Any second now when he finds it. The other side. Yes, there we go. I think he's having, poor old Gordon's having it at the moment. There we are, the top 10 tips. What he actually said to me, what is this one? Top 10 tips for slide presentations that will wow your audience and ensure your slides don't suck. 10 tips, you can download the PDF. If you go along to the website, I suppose it comes to us all, Gordon. If you go along to the website, you can download that particular free PDF there. All we need from you, of course, is your email address. And what will probably happen then is that we'll talk to you, and so will David as well. If you are interested in making your slides better, go to businessconnectionslive.com. Go to the page, you'll find it on the front page of the website of the current program. It will show you the current program. If you're watching at a later date, then if you go to catch up, you can always watch it there as well. And there is an archive of all the 242 programs that we've done on Business Connections Live, where you can go down all the different titles and they'll help you grow your business. Don't forget, go along to his website as well, or you can go to Amazon. You can get hold of yourself a copy of the book, Your Slides Suck. It's a really good book, a really good read to read. And as I said, we're giving this one away for our audience this week, which has really upset him because he's told me how much it's cost him, because they're really, really good quality stuff. So there you go. Listen, I hope you've enjoyed today's program. What we got coming up in the future, let's get the glasses on and see what we've got coming up in the near future. Coming up, we've got Deborah Hume from Minerva Engagement. She's going to be joining us on the programme. She's a neuroscientist. She's going to be coming on and talking about all sorts of different things. She's also a blue chip HR person too. She goes into multinational organisations and she resolves their human resources issues and problems. Louise Punter, CEO, Chamber of Commerce, is going to be back on the programme again. She's going to be talking to us. We've got a whole host of other guests. Next week, we're talking, let me think what we're talking about next week. It'll come to me. Matthew Ruddle's going to be on the programme next week. We are talking all about autoresponders again, and also the sales pipeline. That's on the show next week. But from David Henson and myself, Steve Hunland, thank you very much for watching us today, and have a fantastic week. To do it all again next Monday at 12 noon. Bye for now. Bye-bye.